Today I present to you the Emu Purplehearts by Massdrop. This is essentially a variant of the very popular first edition of the Creative Orvana Live, which has been nicknamed the Cows by the Audiophile community. Emu, who has produced the Purplehearts for Massdrop, is a company that's based out of Singapore that appears to be a subsidiary of Creative. You know, the people that make sound cards and computer speakers. Emu, on the other hand, is most famous for adding a variety of wooden ear cups to Foster-driven headphones, including this one. You might be more familiar with Fostex, which is Foster's brand name of headphones that they use themselves. In my opinion, Emu's best offering to date is the Emu Teak, but I'll save further comments on that particular set for a future review. Today, we're focusing on the Purplehearts, which house two Foster neodymium magnetic drivers with ultra-thin biocellulose diaphragms. Unlike the Teaks, the Purplehearts are meant to be a smaller, more affordable, and more transportable set. Prior to releasing this set for Massdrop, Emu offered this headphone in a walnut cup version, which is still available on Amazon and was favorably reviewed. The Cows are also favorably reviewed. These, however, have not been as well received. In general, people have criticized the Purplehearts for not really being over-ear, being cheaply constructed, having an attached wire, and leading towards an excessively dark tone in character. I hate to say this, but the critics in this case, they weren't wrong. Although I was pleasantly surprised upon first listen due to the general quality of the driver, I quickly realized that the soundstage was limited, the pads were uncomfortable, and they had a terrible mid-bass bloat. Regarding the mid-bass, what happens with these is that it seems to bleed excessively and overwhelm and darken the source of the entire frequency response. For me, this created a tremendous amount of listening fatigue and frustration. In general, they sounded pretty decent, especially for $75, but the bloat ultimately wore on me. Although the idea of an attached wire also bothered me at first, it ultimately proved to be somewhat resilient. It's just stiff enough to remain free of kinks during portable use, while also remaining rugged enough to take a tug or pull. So, in an effort to save my $75 investment, I sought out to fix the deficits through a pad rolling journey. And let me tell you, it has been an expedition. I started out with Sony MDR V6 perforated pads from Brainwaves, and this helped the mid-bass bleed somewhat, but ultimately didn't fix the soundstage or the comfort issues. I then attempted sheepskin Brainwaves HM5 pads for a while, but this led to an echoey presentation that was also tiring, and the pad itself was a bit too large to mount securely on this set. Next, I went with Dakoni M50 sheepskin pads, and although the general size, shape, and comfort was there, the mid-bass bloat returned with a vengeance. I had all but given up on this set when I decided to try an extra set of second generation Meze 99 Classic pads. These were left over from my Meze 99 Noirs. I don't use this set with my 99 Noirs because they are currently sporting the Massdrop alternative first generation Imposter 99 Classic pads. But more on that in a future review. In any case, I won't say I struck gold, but I will say maybe silver. To date, these are the best pads I've found for the Purplehearts. This converts them to over-ears. The darkness is removed, the soundstage opens up without being overly echoey, and the mid-bass bloat is all but gone. My first reaction was that I may have removed too much bass, but upon reflection and much listening, I'd say that any more bass might bring back the dreaded bloat. In the end, what you're left with is a more neutral and spacious set in general. Warm undertones are mostly retained, but never bloated. Separation is pretty average, but notably somewhat more hazy in the lower register. This does lead to some grain in its overall presentation, but I also found this to be relatively amp dependent, with greater haze occurring with warmer powered amplifiers. Having said that, I did ultimately prefer it on a slightly warmer amp, such as the Bravo Ocean, but dynamics were also more impressive on iFi's new Zendac. While an amp is not required, they ultimately benefit from one. Something slightly warm like the Centron Stackport HD that I just reviewed might be a good suggestion for portable use, as that will be slightly warm and have more than enough power to push these. Overall, timbre is mostly decent, however it's not perfect. On certain tracks, it does sound like the music was put through a MIDI machine, especially when treble is emphasized. But I honestly don't think most people will even notice this. Overall, it's still pleasing to the ear, and while it's not the most detailed thing in the world, let's keep in mind the price. For $75, it's plenty sufficient, and surprisingly so. So let's talk about use case. Not everybody wants an expensive set to take around with them. I consider these as more or less a stylish set of beaters. And while I've taken pretty decent care of mine, for the most part I often just throw them in a bag without a case, and they've held up fine. I wouldn't try sitting or stepping on them at all, but ultimately I'd say they're more rugged than they appear. Additionally, they are also extremely light and clamp force is never an issue. I do sometimes develop fatigue on the top of my head from a headband that is a bit too thin. But ultimately, this mostly depends on what headphones I was wearing the night before. If my head is tender, I do notice, though much of the time I barely notice or perceive that I'm wearing them at all, especially after a few minutes of use. While I do wish that these folded up, had an inline mic, and a detachable cable, I really shouldn't be asking for more from these as a cheap portable offering. For a closeback under $100, these do ultimately get my recommendation. But I will stress that the pad change is essential in my eyes, as I would not recommend them without it. Although I have not heard the walnut or the cowl version of this headphone myself, I suspect that this pad swap might be of benefit to them as well. I will include the links to Meze and Drop websites for purchase so that you can complete this mod on your own for minimal additional cost. And ladies and gents, please remember to hit that subscribe button as this really helps the channel grow. And I'm out.